Good afternoon, everyone on the conference, day 2 of the EuroCIO Annual Conference 2020. Welcome back to everyone who was with us yesterday, and welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time. I'll be taking you through a little bit about what to expect for today and a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll go straight into the content. My name is Magnus Franklin. I'm a EU policy strategist at a consultancy called Teneo in Brussels. Before that, I spent a decade or so as a technology regulation journalist at a news agency called MLEX. So I've been looking at all the issues that we discussed from that perspective. But we have a very interesting and exciting set of speakers today. I'll be with you for the duration of the journey, so you might see my face from time to time over these 4 days. Yesterday, for those of you who were here, of course, we heard from some CIOs and technology providers about their digital journey that they've undergone, particularly now in the COVID, turn off and turn on again situation that we've all had to experience. Today we will hear a little bit the same theme from the public sector point of view, and in particular around skills, education skills, upskilling, reskilling, and everything in between. We'll hear from the French and Italian efforts to bring education into the digital age against the backdrop of COVID, of course, the new normal, as this first session is entitled. And then we'll hear from the European Commission about what's happening at the EU level. Of course, the pandemic has profoundly changed how we live and work and learn today, and accelerating the use of technology, which will make this event, I think, more interesting, if possible, than it was originally planned when we had it scheduled for March, and then it was cancelled and rescheduled for today. So I think the timing couldn't be better, and we should have an excellent set of insights from our speakers later on. Before we start, I'm just going to run you through a little bit of housekeeping. And because this is a new platform, some of you may be wondering what all the rooms and the 3D interface is all about. And it's really all about networking and trying to replicate the type of experience we would have had in real life altogether in this virtual setting. One of the most important things is to set up your profile. You can click through the buttons on the left of your screens to put in your name, of course, and all the basic information, but also your interests, because when you go to the networking room during or after the conference, it will match you up with people with similar interests. When you go into the room, you will see icons of people who have listed similar interests to yours, and they will help you connect. You can speak to anyone, of course. If you click on the little chat button on the left, you can access a list of everyone who's in the room, and you will also have access to the chat, the room chat. And the room chat is particularly important for the speaker, for the stage where you are now, because that's where you ask questions. So you can click on the chat, you can ask your question, write it down. We have a whole team here in the room with me to take down your questions, compile them, make sense of them, and feed them to the speakers. One more thing that's maybe important to note is that we have a 30-second lag, more or less 30-second lag. So if you don't feel like we're immediately reacting to your question, it's because we're a little bit out of sync to make the experience work. And a big thanks to Accenture for putting together this innovative platform. I hope you all find good ways to use it and indeed network. Apart from the networking room, which you will find from the lobby, you can also find the EuroCIO room, where you can meet the board and the people from this EuroCIO team. There's an exhibitors lounge where you can learn more about all our sponsors. There are documents and videos and all sorts of interesting stuff, and representatives from our sponsors to talk to there. And you can also, of course, meet people here in the room. And you can, the experience is a little bit heavy on processing, so I really recommend that you, if possible, can clear your web cache or use incognito window to avoid those cookies and so on interfering. Close most of the other stuff that you have going on. I know we all like to have lots of little programs open, but really to improve the experience, it helps. And the same with Windows and tabs that you might have open in your browser. In addition to that, I think if you have any questions, please address them to Julia, who's in the main lobby where you entered. She can address any questions and help you along the way. Yeah, we're here to help. There's a whole production team as well who can iron out any issues with logins or technical issues that you might experience. Hopefully you won't. Yesterday everything ran very smoothly, so we're expecting that today we'll have a similarly delightful experience on the platform. Feel free to try all those functions out now. It won't interfere with the audio that you hear, and you can get a chance to check out, in particular, the chat function, because otherwise you won't be able to ask questions. For the rest, I think we can just go straight into the content. I think that's why you're here. You're not here to listen to me, after all. I want to first introduce our speakers, of course. We have Jean-Marc MERRIAUX, Director for the Directorate for Digitalisation for Education, Ministry and Education and Youth in France, who's had a very busy 6 months in particular recently, trying to really leapfrog the French education system into the digital age. We will hear from Mauro MINENNA, the CEO of ACI Informatica in Italy, who's been supporting the Italian government's overhaul of the education system in Italy. And they will, of course, explain a little bit how the digitization path looks like from a public sector CIO type role, but also a little bit more than yesterday, maybe dive into some of the policy implications that play into this space, and particularly around skills and education. Just on the screen now, if you look at the presentations, you will find emails. I forgot to mention emails also that you can use to get any help you might need. So with that, and I know Jean-Marc has a meeting with the minister shortly after he presents, so we'll start with him, take through any questions after his presentation, and then we will move on to Mauro. So with that, Jean-Marc, do you want to take the floor? And hopefully it works. Are you on mute?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that works perfectly. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for these presentations, and I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon. And I'm going to present you the strategy of the Ministry of Education in France by insisting on a certain number of issues, in particular those related to the data, and it's important for me to explain what's the strategy of the data in the Ministry of Education for 2020. At the first, sorry, I'll take. At the first, I want to explain what the Ministry of Education in France. The Ministry of Education in France, it's a nudge institution. It is in charge of the education of 12 million students who study in 60,000 public and private schools with 800,000 middle school and high school teachers. And it's important to integrate this because it's very, very mouse, and for us to integrate the strategy of the digital, it's important to have the number and to integrate the edge of institutions. At the second point, and it's important to integrate that the digital leadership in Ministry of Education is a lever for the digital transformations of national educations in two dimensions: digital educations in the schools and the management of the education systems. Its mission is to conduct a strategy reflections on the digital transformations of the education system and answer its implementations with the stakeholders and partners. Management actions are mainly guided by, at the first, the transformation, the objectives of all the ministry within the framework of the Publication 2022 programs. It's important for us to integrate that all the ministry of in France integrates this program. And the second, it's the ministry strategic priorities for digital education in the context of structural reforms. Today, it's for the states of France, it integrates the platform states. I explain what the platform states, and if the objective of the state of platforms or of the government as platform is above all to simplify this administrative life of users, and it also presents a new objective for administrations. At the first, by providing all administrations with the principle of openness of standardized APIs, compliance with interoperability rules, or even the concept of reusable services and components that all allow better control of the technological diversity in the logic of a system of unified state informations. And but also by promoting the emergence of a genuine self-organization ecosystem open to all associative or private actors. The standard is the exploitations of the data, and data is the heart of the ministry, because in the future the major potential offered by the collections, analyze, and processing of schools' data and traces of learning pave the way for profound transformations of the education systems. The most effective learning or decision-making environment depend on harnessing data. On this learning or decisions platforms, an enormous amount of data is produced, collected, stored, and processed. The actions of the ministry therefore aim both to better protect this data and to better promote in early school living learning system, in system for visualizing data on student activity, in adaptive learning system. The transformations of the ministry information system and its urbanizations around data will create a real data infrastructure within the ministry for the benefit of all stakeholders through the creations of a data hub educations and participation in the creation of a European sovereign infrastructure like Gaia X. I think that you know Gaia X. Experiments are already being carried out in these directions with the creations of the data platforms for research setup in partnership with the LORIA, a computer laboratory in University of Lorraine in Eastern France, and the National Computer Research Institute in RIA. I think that you know the INRIA. The cloud computing France strategy. The cloud strategy is based on a range of services aimed at securing, pooling, and sharing the data center of all administrations. It offers a common approach to the cloud, distinguishing three levels to reconcile uses and security. The first is an internal cloud, totally controlled by the states. It hosts critical data processing on applications. The second is entrusted to external service provider. It hosts less critical data processing on applications. And these two offers are provided to all departments. And the first consists of a catalog of public offers dedicated to applications without risk to the use of data. Our goals in the next 2 years our goals is to generate the diversity of possibility, technology possibility, an architectural referential for to integrate the data, rule of interoperability on the web norm. You see all the particularity or goals in the next 2 years for us to integrate in this strategy. I want to explain you what's happened with the COVID crisis, because I think that it's important to integrate these situations today. And this strategy will evolve. It will be reinforced by the consequences of what we experienced during the COVID crisis. To analyze everything that happened during this crisis, we create an event and we organize a national conference of digital education on November 4 and 5, 2020 in Poitiers. It's near Paris, and this event is organized around 5 teams, ensure equal access to digital technology for all, work together differently thanks to digital technology, teach and learn digitally, develop responsible and sovereign digital, establish government and anticipate the challenge of the 21st century. To do this, we use a participatory approach based on a free and open platform and collect tens of thousands of responses to a questionnaire and several thousand open contributions. The first analysis shows that the orientation needs of public policies are particularly focused on the free computer equipment and internet connections for teachers, staff, and students to access the public education service. The second, it's the needs in the use of video conferencing and the training of teachers to teach at a distance and answer pedagogical continuity, and the needs in the continuity of administrative work with the strengthening of the digital environment project of the agent's work. The event will be filmed, and I think that it's interesting for you, and everyone will be able to participate on event 2. To come listen to the proposal of on the evolutions of our strategy will be presented on these occasions. I want to insist now of why you use AI in education. Artificial intelligence can help teachers to objective students' difficulties and to individualize their activities in class, analyze of learning difficulty and adaptations of the level of exercise, help to automate the assessment and training of students, conversational interfaces, support in the search for information, planning of education activities, adaptations of learning, range student coaching. And it's important that an example of co-constructions, artificial intelligence innovation partnerships. One of project concerns the fundamental learning of French and mathematics for primary schools pupils. We created this device in the form of schools with EdTech. It's on the university laboratory partnership for create new services based on the possibility of AI to support and advise teachers in their analysis, evaluation, and choice of educational activities, facilitate the implementations of a learning adapted to the needs of each student with the assets of AI and the educational contributions of scientific research. And it's important to integrate that we create an ethics committee for the Ministry of Education because the use of data with artificial intelligence offer a new field of education possibilities. These new potentialities must above all be for the benefit of students and their families, teachers and educational researchers, but must also inform the management of the education system. The Educational Data Ethics Committee, created a year ago in the Ministry of Education, has the mission of animating and developing reflections on the ethical aspect linked to the use of educational data in order to guarantee of a fair balance between valuations and data protections. It's the reason that to create a code of conduct, it's important to explain this the confidence framework. The use of student data must be rigorously protected within the framework of the GDPR, and these conditions, data and learning traces can benefit from technological progress linked to computing power and artificial intelligence. We are therefore working with companies in the digital education sectors, edtechs, to develop a code of conduct to process schools' data and learning traces in a specific and secure manner. To protect the future generations, our ambition is to bring this code to European level. At the end, and it's for to integrate the future, I am sure that we can do better for diversity in digital professions, and it's very important for us that the future more women in the digital world, and our government has set itself an ambitious target. 40% women in the digital sector. It's the reasons that education department is therefore in contact with partners such as women. It's a digital foundations, and the actions aim to let go of the cliché and attract girls, promote the diversity and evolutions of professions, and recruit women, but also write gender bias in data, algorithm, and IA. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for my English because I am French, you understand that. and now I am leave for the questions. If you have questions, I am behind.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc, and incredible timekeeping skills, I have to say. That was very efficient and giving us a whistle-stop tour of all your projects. You really have a lot on your plate, so we all appreciate the time you took to be here. I'm gonna see if there are any questions from the floor, and if there are, we'll be taking them soon. But maybe, Jean-Marc, I mean, you touched on something that's in Brussels a huge buzzword and elsewhere as well. Maybe you could talk us through a little bit about Gaia-X and how Gaia-X looks like from your point of view, because I think it's a fuzzy concept for us who sit in Brussels at least, and it'd be very interesting to see what kind of how it's materializing in your department. That'd be great.
Yes, it's very interesting for us because we want to create a user case of education in Gaia-X. Okay, and it's the reasons why the Ministry of Education has integrated the Gaia-X projects, and I think that we are the only Ministry of Education to integrate Gaia-X to create the user case in Gaia-X project of education, and to integrate what the data of educations, what you use the data in for all stakeholders to integrate in Europe or with the private company or another ministry of another French, and I think that it's very interesting today to integrate the user case of education. And Gaia-X, yes, perhaps a funny project. I am not in France. We have it in the past the like project, but I think that it's interesting to integrate in European approach, and it's the reasons why the Ministry of Education integrate this project.
Okay, and I mean, speaking of I mean, on a similar theme, I mean, you started off talking about all the data that you're trying to use or make use of, and which is also a very hot topic at the EU level. In terms of how you allow this data to reach fruition and be useful, and in particular with the interface between the private cloud that you talked about and the public or semi-public cloud interface that you're building, how do you envisage, let's say, this very valuable data to be usable outside your ministry?
Because today the Ministry of Education is not open. You understand that it's a very problems today for the data. We have the data, but we don't give the data at all partners. You see, and the Ministry of Education want to stay with this data just for the Ministry of Education. And it's very important that you open information systems and to create a real new rules for to value this data. Okay, and the data, it's important for all the system of educations. And today it's not a reality when we work with all partners, and it's the platform of states, because it's for the Ministry of Education, but not only for the Ministry of Education, it's for all the ministry, and it's very important that information system develop APIs on other, but today it's not the case. Okay,
and I mean, if you're there may very well be in the audience today some ed tech companies or people that would be interested in this data. What kind of data would they have access to from your ministry that they could play around with and build applications on?
Yes, it's interesting for us that the data create new applications of the ed tech company. Okay, because today, when tech companies want to create a new applications, it's very difficult for us to have data and to create applications when we use the data. And if the ministry or other partners want to give the data, it's very simple for us. And I think that we can develop rapidement, en tout cas, very quickly the applications for education. And it's today it's an agility. You understand that we can create a new approach of the development of applications.
Okay. One more thing I'd like to, I mean, we'll zoom out to the EU level in a second with André, and we'll look at Italy. But I mean, France is a big country, and the challenge or the education challenge in the banlieues of Paris or Marseille are going to be different than some of the efforts to create digital hubs somewhere or in Toulouse or whatever. How do you at the national level look at the or how do you deal with a subnational challenge, shall we say, because the country is not going to be equal everywhere in its stage of digitization?
It's very difficult because today the education is it's with the local government, the local institutions, and it's very strategy with this with partners, okay, because the local government have the responsibility of the equipment in the schools, and it's not a responsibility of Ministry of Education. And today we have very different and the different country, and it's very important to create a real base, the same base of digital equipments in all the schools. And I think that it's the first the first challenge for the Ministry of Education with the particular way that it's not only a responsibility of the Ministry of Education. It's really a responsibility with all the partners, and particularly the local organizations.
Excellent. I'm just going to check if there are further questions from the floor, but I think, you know, I'm the parent of 2 primary age kids, so maybe we should just all move to France, because it sounds like you guys are doing great things there. I'm sure Belgium is doing as well, so I'm sure you talk to your counterparts here. But I certainly appreciated that helicopter view of your digitization plans, and I look forward to it bearing fruit and really resulting in all the edtech and innovation potential that clearly all this data work that you're doing has. I'm just going to check with my colleagues. Any more questions on the floor? Okay. Monsieur MERRIAUX, thank you very much for...
very much for the... Thank you.
Fabulous. And good luck with your meeting with the minister later on.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Mauro MINENNA from ACI Informatica. Who'll give us a bit of a view from the coal face of helping Italy deal with its digital transformation challenges in the education sector. Without further ado, I'm going to give you the floor, and you can and we can address some questions to you later on. And again, I encourage everyone to put some questions in the chat if you have them, and we'll certainly pick them up. Mauro,
okay, I hope you can hear me just as a starting point. You do? Yes. So here I am. So it's not only education, a matter of fact, but I will talk about the digital transformation all over the Italian government. I am Mauro MINENNA. I am the general manager of RICHIER Informatica, just an information of the context. Believe it or not, the Italian government owns the Automobile Club d'Italia, which is what stands ACI for. And the reason is that we run a service for the government, which is the gathering and running all the administrative information for cars, for instance, the relationship between the plates and the owners, or doing that horrible car taxes collection for the country, which is, I think that is 5 billion euros or so. Now, today, what I'd like to discuss with you is the long path we took to make commoners become citizens. In this sense, there is a very nice movie you possibly saw, everybody, it was called Asterix and the 12 Labors, is 12 Labors. And one of the hardest challenges, one of the hardest tasks was to defeat bureaucracy. And the nice thing is that in the end, you cannot defeat bureaucracy if you're not Asterix, of course, and it doesn't defeat from itself. The reason being that bureaucracy loves to be at the center of the scene, and citizens need to run as crazy from one office to the other, from one bureau to the other, bringing papers, answering more and more times to the same question. So if you cannot defeat this from the inside, then you need to change that in another way. There's a reason why in 2016, Diego Piacentini, who was the senior vice president of Amazon internationally, moved to a role as a head of a digital transformation team. He served 3 years there for free. So in some sense, today, this is a homage, a tribute to this work. And it made everything ready to the transformation we needed to run in the last few months. In the end, the COVID-19 required Italy to have a different approach to the relationship between bureaucracy and people, and to put citizens at the center of the scene. And we were prepared. Maybe we were lucky, maybe we had some clue, don't know, but in the end we did something important. So now I got 3 quite interesting examples of what we did, and here and there I will put some pepper on just saying what we did from my side to help those guys do this terrifically good job. So you can. These are the guys that this is a photo opportunity with Diego and all the guys that are hired from the externally to make this change run. So They had a very clear vision to build up the operating system for the country, a series of blocks to put citizens and enterprises at the center of the scene, and a mission that was to make public services available, accessible in a mobile-first approach. Consider that each and every people here in the country has a mobile. Maybe we don't have a desktop PC, but definitely we have a mobile. So mobile first was important, but it was important to have an architecture based on APIs. The reason being, we needed to disrupt silos. Wherever possible, public administration bureaucrats build walls between the information in order to ask the same question again, and again. So, which were the principles? Digital by default, once only. Don't ask me twice. Don't ask me twice. It's not a right to ask me twice. To use a old Bob Dylan song. Look at inclusiveness and accessibility, openness and transparency. Look cross-border. We have a part of the European Union, like it or not, and being interoperable by default. Of course, offering a layer of trustworthiness and security. What we did, 3 very short examples. First one, make each initiative, each software of the public sector in open source. Here, what we needed to change, bottom up. In 2005, we asked by law to put all open source in a central repository. What happened in 10 years? Nothing. Law doesn't move intention. We moved this in a different approach, and the approach was, let's build up a GitHub repository. Let's put 10 huge public sector initiatives in it and say, okay, bureaucrats, we have 10 big things there. Can you do something better? And in the end, they did. And now it's a huge success. We've got a GitHub Developers Italia, a GitHub initiative. It's an open source channel, not a dedicated infrastructure, an infrastructure that runs on a well-known repository with a very simple process to make all developers put code in and the public administration grant the access, and an automatic indexing. So when you put some code there, that code is automatically harvested and put in. A few projects. The first one, believe it or not, we didn't have a centralized repository for all the citizens and the places in which they live. So when they had to move, they had to bring the paperwork from one municipality to the other. Didn't work. It was 3.5 million hours of work each year, useless, and a lot of problems with the police checks and the like. And what we did, again, we put some small municipalities that wanted to be the starting point heroes, the very, very, very small cities of Bagnocavallo in 2016, 17,000 people. Now we got 42.9 million people in that centralized repository. And it was an agreement that needed to be done municipality by municipality. And you know that Italy is a strange place with very, very small, nice, beautiful, but really small cities. Second pillar, an approach to centralize the payments, tax collection. Again, each and every municipality, each and every region, each and every place with its own gathering process. The problem being that the central government, the Ministry of Economy, didn't know a damn of what was going on with tax collection. So we will build up a centralized infrastructure. And in 2019, it was 8 billions collected there, moving through to 13 billions in 2020. I'd say that I'm very happy to say that RICHIER was a provider of half of that money. 4 billion were car tax collection. So we bootstrapped the operation. This is something that will return later on in my presentation. It's quite important to say that each and every part of the system can do its part. So it's a bottom-up process. You cannot do that by law. A second important pillar, Io. Io means I in Italian. And the concept was, let's put in the pocket of the citizen each and every information in the relationship between the citizen and the public administration. Again, all messages from all over the places to a centralized fashion in a centralized message inbox. All payments, again, connecting the PagoPA experience with the app, and all documents. I need to avoid asking you twice things. And what's more, in Italy, if you had to keep 10 years of data in your places, since the government could ask, let's demonstrate that you paid taxes in 2016. That's crazy. We changed that, so each and every document is now in a centralized repository available to the citizen. So the citizen has the same picture of the public administration. And so we were again a part of this, as we put all the digital car ownership certificates. It's something like 50 millions in EO app. And so we had a huge, we were a huge part of this starting point. Again, imitation was the killer approach to this. As soon as you started, the other ones were following you. Finally, last concept, the new normal made those processes run faster, even on an higher slope. So what happened is that now 2 million citizens are using EO app on a regular basis. Why? They need to get in touch with the administration, staying at home, staying safe. Almost everybody is now used to pay taxes online. The e-learning initiative is going all right, even if I feel it's not as brilliant as our cousins in France did, since it's way too much delegated to local administration, something I don't like. And what's more, 1 million users now have in their pockets an app to know that they were in touch with somebody who had the coronavirus. And that is quite important. In my company, what happened is that now 18 million documents were signed digitally. So way less sheets of paper going on from one office to the other. And we had to virtualize 2,500 workstations to make the smart working thing happen. In the end, the COVID emergency accelerated that implementation timing and moved towards a easier, a fuller adoption in the national territory. To finish up, yes, systems cannot be changed from inside. If you are not Asterix, you will not defeat bureaucracy, but crisis can lead to opportunity. And if you act the change you want to see bottom-up, change in the end happens. I'm quite proud of what we did in the country, and I'm quite proud as such Informatica to have been part of it. And that is, I think, 11 minutes, so we are.
Mauro, that was, again, amazing timekeeping, and thanks for being so succinct with your presentation. I'm just going to, again, ping my colleagues to see if there are questions from the floor. But I think just to start us off, I mean, if you look at Italy from, let's say, the European Commission point of view, in terms of digital, it's second to bottom, I think, on all sorts of metrics in terms of take-up of digital, in terms of broadband capacity, etc. Has this been an obstacle, have you found, or is there a digital mindset in Italy that might not be reflected in the statistics that we don't know about?
Well, we used to make those information collected, I'd say, we were quite pessimistic when it comes to tell our things outside. I think it should be considered in a different fashion. And what's more, that acceleration is, I think, is better than what we expect. I feel as well that no, it's not. I think we need to defeat that approach. We have got a country that is historically very fragmented. So as long as it is possible, each and every part of it wants to move for itself. Build up an infrastructure is something that we did. I feel that it's getting much better now than it was before. But I see the blossoms of a nice future in this sense in the next few months.
Very good. That sounds really promising. I'm happy to hear that, Mauro. I'm sure we all are. Just in terms of the COVID context for everything that you described, can you describe a little bit how the past 6 months have played out in terms of accelerating or frustrating or changing the rhythm of your project?
Mm-hmm. Well, for this made things change in an unexpected fashion. For instance, there were some offices that were just refusing to adopt to make citizens access the offices in a digital fashion. They had to build up in an emergency time window those processes. And they found out that in the end, there were some building blocks available, and they used it. So for months, for instance, we got an initiative called SPEED in Italy, which is not a mix of cocaine and heroin, as something could expect, but it is a way to identify digitally citizens and to have a single sign-on all over the administrations. It started with, it was not that used since the public administration refused to integrate their own sign-on with that system. As long as they were obliged to do that, it was easier when we had to make citizens access digital services in this emergency phase to use them. So they were not used to, they didn't want to. In the end, they finished being required to do that. And so that was the change. Another direction is smart working. We had a very limited approach to smart working since we were a very strong resistance towards this. We passed from, let's say, 1 per 1,000 to 70% of people working at home. And in the end, people is working. They are not at home glazing at the window. So no, this is good news in some sense.
Yeah, I think we certainly recognize that all over Europe. I mean, we're going to segue into the EU perspective in a second, but some of the things that you mentioned, resonate very well in Brussels, and we've been discussing these for a long time. The once-only principle, for example, or single sign-ons for citizen interfaces to government services and so on. How much of your work was, let's say, EU related, or did you interface with European Union people in this, or was it more or less organic from the Italian side?
It was not on my side, since, as I told you before, I'm just a part of that initiative. But definitely, yes, the digital transformation team, Mr. Piacentini, was in touch continuously with the European Union, since a lot of those initiatives had to be connected with the plans of evolution, the 2020 initiative, for instance, and the like. Some were successes, some are going slower than expected. For instance, the wideband initiative is not going as expected, but we have got a terrifically complex country in terms of orography, since we've got plenty of mountains, and it's quite hard to connect each and every place. And yes, that is not definitely a huge success, but I feel we were continuously in touch with the EU.
Okay, great. Just one final question, which has been on my mind the whole time, and I'd like to wrap up with, which is, because we have a room full of CIOs, and private sector people mainly, and your interactions have been with the government. Are there any learnings you can take if you're coming from the private sector as a CIO, and you're used to dealing with corporate processes and corporate decision-making imperatives and so on, and you're faced with, where you started your presentation, right? The bureaucracy, or let's say a democratically accountable system of decision-making. Are there some tips and tricks to bear in mind when you're dealing with that kind of client almost, or counterpart?
Well, matter of fact, I come from the private sector, so I had to learn myself that it's also of quite a different color. I'd say that unfortunately, bureaucracy, I cannot say that bureaucracy is democratically controlled. Bureaucracy is a beast completely independent. In the end, it's itself. Yes, you have to defeat them patiently and moving somehow in their own field. For instance, I had to learn a lot about laws and regulation of the country, since when they want to say no, the first thing is that it's forbidden by the law. And we have got one of the hugest and widest and heaviest portfolio of laws, I'd say from Hammurabi on. And it's quite hard to defeat that.
Okay, so there's still no buying into the concept that code is law, I guess. We still have to get. Yeah. Look, Mauro, it's been really fascinating to get the inside track on Italy's digitization story, and I think we all learned a lot. I mean, we're out of time for the Q&A, but the networking is still possible. Mauro's going to be available. You can continue the discussion with him and ask questions bilaterally. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any additional questions. So with that, Mauro, thank you very much. And I'd like to give the floor to André Richier from the European Commission's DG GROW, the Internal Market and Industry Department. He's a well-known face, I understand, here in the EuroCIO community, and you know each other well. So I'm confident that he's very comfortable in this conference room on this stage. But I think, you know, especially with everything that's happened over the past year, and not just COVID, but you know, the new commission and all the new energy that comes with that changeover in the EU. There's a lot to update us on, and a lot of interesting material to share with us. So with that, André, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very sympathetic to what I heard before, because I've been following this, of course, for my whole professional life. Starting working at IBM, but being taught actually programming by an enlightened mathematics teacher many years before. And what was striking at that time is that there were discussions, of course, of bringing new technology and new tools to education and government. By the way, the first law regarding modernization of government and introduction of information technology was at the time of President de Gaulle. So you can see how much time it takes. And in the case of education and new technologies, one of the greatest challenge, of course, was to give sufficient digital skills to pupils, and also to attract pupils and students to study computer science. And computer science itself is not so well taken off and promoted in all countries. There are big discrepancies, of course, between European countries. And when it comes actually to teach digital skills and computing and informatics in school, it's just last year that the French government decided there would be a dedicated discipline in secondary education, and there will be dedicated teachers. So 40 years after the introduction of the PC. So you see, these things takes a lot of time, and there is still, of course, and the COVID crisis helped this into some sense, to bring also the opportunity of people to use technology for exam, because the frustration has been in the past. At my time, it was pocket calculators, but for many of those who were using IT tools at home or at school, they could not use them for their exam, which of course is quite shocking, because in industry you expect people to use the latest technology. So it takes an awful lot of time, but we are moving definitely in the right direction. And one of the reasons is because the skills crisis is now quite obvious. So this was here the title of the World Economic Forum this year. So we need a reskilling revolution. It has been discussed for many years, but now the acceleration of the digital transformation and the Green Deal and the green challenge, green transition, is forcing enterprises to change radically the way they operate. And then one of the things that has been discussed a little bit before, so this issue of, whether things are allowed by law or not. Here the problem is not so much whether they are allowed or not, it's whether you have the people who have the skills, the competence to deliver. I mean, it's like you would have a football team and you have your players who have 30 years of experience, but they don't run very fast on the pitch. So you really need to have the best possible talent, because this is a global fight for talent. This is a global market for talent. And CIOs use also the best possible resource available. So if you take consulting companies, IT companies, they have massive staff, of course, in Asia, in India. So this is really, when it comes to IT, a global market for talent. And here, one of the challenges that we have here is to accelerate this transition to enable people to adopt new application, new development, and to acquire this competence in Europe. And the discussion whether the CIO should be a digital transformation leader has been running up for 30 years. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it does not. But this is a very important issue. So how now we can facilitate this reskilling and upskilling revolution using the different tool and instrument, and also the funding, the huge amount of funding which is now being made available to governments to invest in the recovery and the resilience facility. There have been plenty, of course, of study on the impact on automation and employment. The thing is that employment keep growing. We see the number of jobs being created being constantly growing. However, the impact of employment is focused on certain segments, for which inevitably the inequalities are increasing. So when you look at these different studies, the first one, the one of Carl Benedict Frey and Osborne in 2013, was ringing bells. So this is where you have all this think tank and reflection about the future of jobs and what can be done to facilitate the transition to these new economies. And then you had the more recent studies, which indeed presented a level of impact that will be much lower than anticipated. And at the same time, as I said, there are jobs which disappear and new jobs which are being created. When we reflect about the new jobs, we see that they are based on the demand of the market, based on the constraint also of fighting climate change, and now indeed also fighting the pandemic. So new jobs are being created. It's very difficult, of course, to be accurate with this prediction, but to a large extent, it's a need for industry to work together to better anticipate the skills need and to better be ready to train and acquire the talent pool. Because again, when you want to discuss your needs with education ministries or with higher education or vocational education and training, it takes them usually between 4 or 5 years to develop a new curriculum. And not only when I say development in terms of content, but in terms of accreditation. There is a whole timeline before that. And usually what happens is once they develop the curriculum and they make it available, the people say, well, that's no longer what I need. And we need a much more flexible way of developing this match between the demand and the supply. And to a large sense, in the past, the effort and the funding and the activities were very much supply-oriented. We heard before that the representative of the Ministry of Education in France, he said very clearly, it's the regions. It's the regions who are funding, and he was precisely mentioning equipment. So major focus of the past has been on the level of equipment, the mythic number of students per PC, so how to reduce it. Well, actually, people can have a smartphone and notebooks by themselves, and actually this is the trend. This is where we should go. And each of the teachers, or if the trainers, had to invent by himself, while it would be much better to have a centralized platform where the teachers would find ready-made content, courses, tools to be used in a massive scale, because the problem has been, as always, an issue of scale. How many people can access those training? How many people can reach through this training? How many people can be certified to demonstrate that they have acquired the skills which are needed? And that's particularly also important for the IT world, because the IT world, we are talking about computer science courses being introduced in the 50s, last century. We still don't have a mature IT profession. So it's still a mix of people who have studied through the full scale of computer science studies to people who have been taking all sorts of courses or taught by themselves. So sometimes you have genius who are excellent, but sometimes you have cowboys and people, of course, who present great difficulties. And now the analogy that I was using with the football team, if you have all professionals, you're better. You have greater chance to deliver results. While if you have people who not play only on Saturdays, you may have difficulties. And I think it's one of the challenge to manage this pool of talent and these capacities. The major trend, and the one which is of course the most disturbing, I was talking about inequalities, I was talking about jobs being disappearing and the new job being created not necessarily available for those who are losing their jobs. It's a global phenomenon, and it's quite important in the US and in Europe, in developing countries. And here you see in red, it's the high skill. In pink, it's the low skill, and the middle skills are in blue. And what is quite clear from this picture is that there is a disappearance, a crunch of the middle skills. There is increasing demand of higher sophisticated skills, and in IT it's quite obvious. We'll see another confirmation of that in a minute. But what is quite obvious is that those jobs which are in the middle are disappearing, so average is no longer enough. You need to have highly specialized skills, and you need to be able to update them on a regular basis. And that, of course, has a huge consequence in terms of social cohesion, in terms of also policy priorities. What should we do to make sure that the maximum number of people who lose these middle skills jobs can acquire high skilled jobs, and at the same time provide a safety net for those who are lagging behind? And here it's quite clear that Luxembourg, Austria, France, Ireland, I mean, the most developed country, the most developed the country is, the biggest the impact of this polarization is felt. Now, having said that, especially when it comes to sharing information, because developing solution by itself is not a solution when it comes to training, and especially in those days where budgets are cut and restructuring is happening. So we see that, interestingly enough, the percentage of academic experts in education institutions which are involved in redesigning and training opportunities is much lower than we would have expected. So we would have expected them to be on top. No, it's specialist department in the firm or professional firm. So, and this is a big shift. Something like that could not exist 20 years ago. So now the shift is clearly towards new service and new training and education providers using platforms. And we have seen, of course, the explosion of this Coursera, this EDX, etc. platform, which are increasingly developing ad hoc specialized solutions tailored to sectors and even tailored to. And here, this is unfortunately an area where Europe has not been able, and higher education institutions have not really been able to take the lead. What's happening currently is that actually they are paying fees to be on those platforms that I was talking about, which are based in the US. So last year, we organized a major conference on defining a skills for industry strategy 2030. So you see on top left, you see Thierry Baril, who is the Vice President of Human Resources in charge of skills. And we had many experts, and we had many people coming from different sectors, but they all have the same message. We need to work together. We need to get organized. We expect that the European Commission will help us to structure this cooperation, because this cooperation needs to be organized around sectors and supply chain. And this cooperation also needs to be organized at the European level, so that we don't reinvent the wheel, and we can put this, I would say, this pressure, or provide this incentive to national education and training system to accelerate their pace of their modernization. So what were the main taking from this, if I can summarize and take into account also the consequence of the crisis? Well, the transition is accelerating, and it's putting considerable stress. So we have seen sectors, aeronautics, so this is why I was mentioning Airbus, is suffering a lot. Airlines, Lufthansa, laying off 20,000 people. So we see there's huge problem and huge stress on sectors and on the labor market, because for the time being, a lot of people are still being paid. But at the same time, nobody knows whether the recovery will be there and what will be the impact on employment, and whether a large-scale unemployment wave may come in matter of months. When we look at the IT specialists, so I was busy in this and working with EuroCIO for many years. The last time I was working on this and making forecasts, we were anticipating that by 2020 there will be a shortage of 750,000 specialists. Actually, the figures which have been communicated to me by the colleague who work in the digital department in DigiConnect, they said that it's more 1 million IT specialists, which is, so the gap is increasing. At the same time, we have all this pressure on employment, the gap on IT specialists is increasing, and we will need to reskill 100 million workers in the next 5 years. So the challenge is huge. We never had these kinds of figures in the past, because these are actual development. So inevitably, large-scale new initiatives are indispensable to ensure that we could support this successful transformation, and that also we benefit and we offer to SME the opportunity to access the talent. Because one thing has been in the past that the company were outbidding themselves to get the best talent. I mean, it's no longer possible. We need to increase the pool, so this is why we need to cooperate to make sure that everybody can benefit. One of the interesting thing is that in Europe we are very good. They are very good practice. The problem is that they are low scale. They lack visibility and their impact is not sufficient. So we really need to work on this issue of scalability and sustainability, and exchange best practice in a more straightforward and regular way. So we have been working on this shared vision with member states, industry and social partners, and this is currently being done focusing on industrial ecosystem. And that was the breakthrough which was brought by Commissioner Breton, and the industrial strategy which was adopted in March is to provide a structure based on ecosystem and supply chain. I will come back to this in a minute. So that's to illustrate what I was saying before, is that the level of competence which is requested even for IT specialists keep increasing. So we see that in 2005, we were quite happy if people had tertiary education. Now it's really increasingly becoming mandatory, and it's keep increasing all the time. So it says that the traditional capacity that people had to move to IT and learn on the job and this kind of thing is becoming increasingly more difficult, because we need people who are much more capable to adapt. And the other thing is that they need, of course, to know how to do programming, but they need to know about the business. They need to know to communicate. They need to also be able to anticipate and integrate and adapt to change rapidly. Because for programming, I mean, you have millions of people which are available in India, in China, or elsewhere. So this is no longer an issue there, because this has been booming for the recent years. So it's an issue of increasing the talent pool, but also ensuring the quality. So it's not just an issue of number, it's an issue of quality also. Because when we look about those who are in demand when it comes to IT professional, we see that basically it's software and application developer analyst, and very much focus on certain given areas, not something which is generalist. Of course, they need to acquire basic competence when they go to school, but very quickly they need to specialize in a certain area, in certain domains. Because, as I said, this talent gap is global. We see growing needs in all over the place. At the same time, we hear about the millions of people who are getting engineers and PhDs in Asia. So we are no longer living in the world of the past, where the main competitors were the US and Japan. I mean, obviously, especially in software, India and Asia are very strong competitors. But it still remains that in France, in Spain, in Italy even, there is still a shortage of talent. So that's the slide I was using in the past, and which now needs to be updated because it's not 750,000, but it's 1 million actually. And on top of that, the e-leadership skills, the digital leaders, that's something on which we have been working with EuroCIO, Peter Hagedorn, in the past. So how we can help CIOs to understand the challenge of the business, be part of the board, be able to influence the digital transformation of the companies, developed innovative application, and I understand that it remains a challenge. Now we still have at the same time so this fact that 37% of employees are even missing basic digital skills, and this is of course depends very much on the country. So mostly in Eastern Europe, whether you are in a city or whether you are in a rural area. So there are big again discrepancy when it comes to this issue. And the fact is, however, that politically, and when you look about all the major programs which have been launched by big IT companies, usually they focus on that. They focus on this basic digital skills. So when you look about program launched by Microsoft, by Google, etc., a lot of their effort is devoted to that because it's part of their corporate social responsibility policy. And when it comes to the IT professional skills and when it comes to the leadership skills, there is much more difficulty to find a suitable offer and programs. The challenge that we had gone through with EuroCIO when we were cooperating on this, the problem, of course, is for CIOs to find the time to acquire, to go and to learn those skills, and also the cost. We need a much more flexible solution. We need much cheaper also solution. And the other thing, of course, is the time scale. I mean, when you talk to a CIO about something that will bear fruit in 3 to 4 years, it doesn't necessarily work. I mean, it needs to have results much faster than that. Just because also statistically the tenure of the job is much shorter than that. So we have been working also with EuroCIO and SIGREF in particular on fostering IT professionalism. So working on maturing the IT profession that I was talking about, which is still not there. So on body of knowledge, on professional ethics, code of conduct, education and training, so curriculum guidelines and competences. And when I mention competences, is to have description, and we have European standards for describing competences for IT professionals. What they call in France la nomenclature for SIGREF, or competences. And this has been, of course, reflected in a document which were released on strengthening IT professionalism. And we have been also working with some CIOs on the issue of the digital capability of enterprise. And we have been working on this, especially with small and medium-sized enterprise. So how a company can not only acquire and strengthen the professionalism of its IT team itself, but also increase the digital capability of the company, because you can have the best soldiers if the general is of course incompetent, or if the weapons are inappropriate. Of course, the impact will not be the same. So here we have been developing synergies between those methodologies and those tools, those capability maturity framework, in liaison with the European Competence Framework for IT professionals, to make sure that at the level of the company, you can manage not only the competence of your teams, but you can also manage the IT capability of your company and the digital capability, maturity of your company. The two go together. Plus, as I said, we need to have digital leaders, not just people who fix problems. These are the two tools which have been developed and made available at the European level. So the one I was mentioning on which we have been working with SIGREF and CIOs. So this common European framework for ICT professionalism, which cover all sectors. And also this, which is, by the way, a European standards. And this other tool, DIGCOMP, which is defining the digital competencies for citizens. And that's a very powerful tool for schools in particular, starting with primary schools. So how to provide skills to pupils and how to measure those skills. And we have also a tool called Selfie to help the school to also evaluate and the pupils to evaluate their competence. So it's not just a description on paper, it's also a tool that helps people to manage their competence. So these things are the basis on which we can build, of course, further competence-related initiative. Now I would like to discuss about the structure of the IT professional workforce in Europe and to show that it's interesting to see that, the size of the pie, of course, show that the total volume of IT professionals in the given country. So you see that the UK and Germany are by the biggest. But what is interesting to see also is that in the colors you have the red, which is management, architecture and analysis. You have the core IT professionals, so mostly the software engineer and analyst. Then you have other type of professional which are more, I would say, and to the lowest level of technician. And you see that in this aspect, what is the most important is to have the most advanced competencies. And you see the level of development and digital maturity of the countries by the repartition of the people. So the bigger the red square, the better the country is performing. And that shows that in Europe, mostly the people are working in the non-IT sector. In Asia, it's the other way around. You have more than 60% of people working in IT itself. And it has consequence, of course, with our initiative embedded in the European Skills Agenda. So I will briefly now talk to you about the Pact for Skills, which is very new and will be launched on the 10th of November. So the idea here is to launch large-scale partnership that I was talking about, based on major player in industrial ecosystem, we together with public authorities to make sure that we mobilize critical mass of investment and to focus on specific upskilling and reskilling target, but that should cover the full ecosystem and supply chain. And this should be supported, of course, by national and regional partnership, because, of course, depending on the sector, some regions are more interested and committed than others. It's also built on something that many of you know is the Digital Skills and Job Coalition, which has been launched in 2016. So in France, it's MEDEF, which is in charge of the national coalition. 120 pledges have been made and 12 million beneficiaries. And these are, here there is a melting pot, of course, of basic digital skills and skills for professionals. And this will continue. And I invite you very much to look at the Digital Skills and Job Coalition pledge viewers, because you can see concrete pledge, and you can also cooperate with the pledges and join the coalition also to work on providing and contributing to the development of digital skills. For the future, for the first time ever, there will be a dedicated budget for advanced digital skills. So this is on the Digital Europe program, in complement to all the effort that have been made already on the Erasmus, Horizon Europe in research, and the European Social Fund that provide training, but which is co-managed by the Commission and the Member States. And the new development, of course, is that Member States will have plenty of resource to address upskill and reskill in the recovery and resilience facility. For the Commission has proposed 700 million, but unfortunately, I guess that this figure will be lower. So for the time being, we don't know exactly the total picture, but the thing is that to agree on the recovery and resilience facility, we had to cut on the multi-financial framework program opportunities. And the possible action is to work on master program to increase, of course, the quality and the numbers, but also focus on short-term training courses and facilitate job placement. I mean, that's the kind of thing that could be supported in the future. And again, we will very much strengthen the cooperation at sector level, at ecosystem level, building on the experience of the Blueprint for Sectoral Cooperation, which started in 2018. And which will be rolled out also at national and regional level after 4 years. And here you have the sectors which have been covered. So it started in 2018 with automotive, space, tourism, textile, maritime technology. And we have added different sectors and defense technology more recently, but also energy related and microelectronics. The next wave, which will start to be implemented in January 2021, include in particular software, services, blockchain, and cybersecurity. And I would very much encourage you to participate or contribute to this exercise, because that's from there we will develop a shared vision on how we can improve skills for software services in a long-term perspective, and develop also solutions that can be made and tailored to the different relevant sectors. This is the picture from the industrial strategy. So the 14 ecosystem, you have all of them here in kind of marguerite. And those boxes in blue are the areas where you have already a blueprint ongoing. So something that has already started, and we will build on this to launch the pact. So the pact will cover 2020-2027, and compared to the past, it will be demand-driven. So this time, it's industry that will set the agenda. At the EU level, we will provide support to help facilitate the emergence of this partnership. We will also facilitate the promotion of best practice. We will update and engage into new policy development. For example, in the context of post-COVID, we are now working on the update of the industrial strategy because things are changing so fast. So there will be an update early next year. But most also important, we want to leverage and use all the existing funding at all levels, and we want to increase the level of investment from the public and the private. So it incentivizes the private sector to invest more by providing support also from the public sector. And really, this is something where we want to have a visible impact in coming years. Now, if I look about the final roadmap and leading us to this launch on the 10th of November, so we have consulted on a charter for the pact. The consultation was stopped on Monday, so we have received 700 responses that we are consolidated. The charter will be made public around the 27th of October. We have been seeking and consulting with stakeholders to seek agreement and support for that, and agreement and support has been very extremely positive. We have been organizing roundtable on several ecosystems, those who are most mature. So automotive in 23rd of September, microelectronic on the 5th of October. This morning we had the roundtable on aerospace and defense. We will have before the end of the month a roundtable on construction, on tourism, on social economy, and on health. So this should lead us to a first wave of launch of pact in those ready ecosystem. But this will be followed up in the future. And another milestone for us that will be important will be the industry days at the end of February, where we'll present the state of play and we'll present additional ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, André. Sorry, it took me a few seconds. I was taking intensive notes on everything you were saying. That was all very interesting. And we have lots of questions as well for you, which I think is great. The first one I want to pick up is really something that you touched on, and I think is extremely important. I mean, you started talking about, you know, your past at IBM and so on, and the tech skills and the lack of tech skills. And we worked hard to address the lack of tech skills, even though the gap is widening, unfortunately. But I think the question is more about the soft skills, and in particular the catalog. I mean, you mentioned the taxonomy in a sense for tech skills that's been developed, and you mentioned CCREF's work on that. Yes. But how do where are we in terms of categorizing the soft skills, the communications, the leadership, and everything else that's needed?
Well, several attempts have been made in the past. One of the most exciting at the end of last century was this decision of Aalto University to merge the Faculty of Economics, to merge engineering, and to merge the design. At the same time, it not necessarily worked very well because there were some resistance, and again, changing the way people work, it's not easy. No, what works well is, and this is also the experience that we had with EuroCIO when we work on seeking opportunities to develop and promote digital leadership skills. You need to have much more modular approaches, much more flexible approaches, so something that can be modified and changed very fast, something that people can learn and practice. But when it comes to, in particular, SMEs, you need also that people bring their cases. So it means that instead of learning something which is by the book in a theoretical way, I mean, you need to learn by doing to some extent. And I did not mention it for sake of time, but we have also a digital opportunity initiative where we help. It's a kind of Erasmus for people, students, for example, to go and spend time in enterprise and supported by a fee, like Erasmus, to acquire particular experience, and that's what I think is important. The other thing on conceptual basis is this T-shaped approach. So basically, you need to have a basic and strong technical knowledge. I mean, this you can escape that, but on top of that, you need to build business acumen. You need to understand the sector in which you are working. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I don't think that, of course, it's necessarily absolutely mandatory for everybody. But if you do that, you are able to fight the competition which is in India, because just knowing how to code is not enough. That's for sure.
Thank you very much for that diving into that a bit further. And your answer actually segues straight into the second question I had, which is about the, I mean, some call it brain drain, some call it competition for talent and so on. I mean, when you sit in Brussels and look at the EU as a whole, one of the questions, and it came up yesterday as well to a certain extent, is how do we make Europe as a whole grow the talent pool and address this problem together, rather than getting countries looking after their own, say, competitive advantage and growing their own talent pool, or sniping from each other and you know, getting clever Romanians into France and then not sending any French people back to Romania in a way. How do you approach that from DG Grow and from your desk, that challenge?
Yes, I mean, for us, we looked at this mostly from the need of enterprise. And as I said, now there is this shift of being more demand-driven than supply-oriented. And because supply-oriented, you may get a lot of people, but people decide to move wherever they want. And this was indeed the case for Poland, Romania, that people were getting courses there, and then they were moving to Germany, Austria, or elsewhere. And you cannot avoid that. So the issue is how to make sure that we have something that also meet the request or the need of enterprise, because enterprise, they need also to implement themselves in different European countries, and depending on your clusters, depending on your specialization, and that's again a link with this notion of smart industrial specialization, you are able to attract talent and to keep them and nurture them. And that's also something that can be experienced in Romania and elsewhere. The need for cooperation, the need for exchange of information, and the main one of skills intelligence in particular, means that it saves you a lot of time, it saves you a lot of resource, because you are not going into a dead hand, and you are not wasting millions into something that at the end there will be no demand. Because it has been the case in the past that people were developing programs and nobody wanted to take them. And actually you see that there has been an inflation of masters, and now you will see this consolidation, because ultimately what people want is something where they can not only acquire the possibility to work, but also to have this lifelong learning. So I think the biggest change is that it's not just this basic focus on education, it's more on this lifelong learning, more on this, and this is why I was talking about reskilling and upskilling. It's more to offer the opportunity for people and for all of course, to acquire new skill on a continuous basis. And this is a big challenge, of course, for the future. And in my view, the only way to go through this is through platform and cooperation with the private sector, because of the inertia and the level of capital that it would require to invest. This will not be possible just by a traditional brick and mortar education system. And as I said, I mean, there have been opportunity for the last 40 years to do it. It's still not been there.
Indeed. I'm not sure, André, if you were with us yesterday, but we had a case study actually from Denmark. There was the jewelry retailer Pandora talking about their digital journey, and the issue of skills came up. And I think it was a very interesting discussion, because one of the questions was, if you are a non-tech company, and I think a lot of people in this room will be CIOs for companies that are not associated with technology as such. How do you attract that talent that you need to take the digital transformation journey that we all need to go through, right, over the next few years? When, yes. I mean, if you're a computer science student or you have the tech skills, you might be more likely to go to a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon and grow your career there than to go to
yes.
a publisher or...
No, that's true, and I understand this, especially if you have a PhD in this field. But it's not the case of the majority. So I think a very interesting development is the fact that a lot of people who are studying in business schools or elsewhere are also acquiring, through this modularized type of learning, knowledge in digital technologies. And when it comes to knowing and this digital leadership I'm talking about, digital leadership is not only for the CEO. It's something where a project leader could be able to have it at a much lower pay grade. And this is something where you can bring talent from other pool. So, and especially women, because when we talk about women which are getting computer science degrees, I mean, it's less than it was in my time in the 80s. So the situation is worse. But you can have women who understand how to use IT to transform a way of selling a product, designing a product, etc. And then she can rely on teams, and which, by the way, could be in Bangalore or elsewhere. So the pure IT talent, coding pure, is available everywhere. So, but you need to have in your company, especially if you are in a sector which is tourism whatsoever, you need to be able to handle and discuss with these people, not necessarily doing the work, but you need to control and manage. And that's what definitely people can make good careers, because this is not something where you can get competition from abroad. So the capacity of understanding the potential of IT, of managing IT teams, remote IT teams, integrate them, is something that can be developed with people in Europe. And then you have another talent pool, again, those people coming from business school, from manufacturing, for whatsoever, engineering, that could acquire these capabilities. So this is why I was showing this pyramid. I think for Europe, we need to move our skills upwards. We need to upskill and get better knowledge about the needs of the market, to anticipate and serve them better, and using the tools and the human resource, which again are available on a global basis.
Excellent. And we could sit here happily, I'm sure, for hours and talk. I know you're a super busy man, so I'm not going to abuse the privilege, and we're out of time. But I have one final question for you, André, which is more maybe structural to where you sit as a policymaker. And I just want to recall, I mean, back in 1994, Finland was in a terrible state, and they were going through a recession, and everything was really, really bad there. And then the Prime Minister at the time, Esko Aho, decided that the whole government budget should pivot towards R&D, innovation, education, etc. Now, he lost his job. He was deposed as Prime Minister, so it was a terrible career choice for him. But Finland is still the best education system in the world. It still is an R&D innovation leader. So clearly that payoff really lasted for a long time. But in the kind of policy sphere where, I mean, we have 5-year cycles, and we have to try to make policies that last a generation. how do you approach that as a civil servant, as someone who's trying to achieve things that will only bear fruit in maybe 5 years, 10 years, after the mandate of Ursula von der Leyen is long gone, or maybe not.
Yes, but I mean, there is a difference between the politician who is, I would say, the jack of all trades, who move from one portfolio to the other and has to adapt very fast, and is supposed to present a strategy and deliver results in few months, to the one who is specializing in a particular field and have the insight and has been able, I mean, to educate and discuss and present. You mentioned Finland, but think about Estonia. I mean, Estonia has been a great success stories, and everybody's happy with that. But that requires, of course, vision, insight, stamina, courage, and a lot of hard work. I mean, in France, we all know about General de Gaulle, but when General de Gaulle launched his call for resistance on the 18th of June of 1940, there were very few people with him, maybe few than 10. And look at the end. So I think there is a need, and certainly civil servants can help, because they are not moving that frequently, except those who are going into politics for career purposes. But if you are committed to something, indeed, it takes time. And here I could quote a book of Walt Rostow, this advisor of President Johnson and President Kennedy. His last book was, the title was 60 years to bring ideas to market. So you see how much time it takes. And I will quote also Friedman. Friedman was saying to Shoshana Zuboff in 1967. Shoshana Zuboff was just published a book, a very interesting book on the surveillance capitalism. He was saying in 67, and you see this, what he was saying, in 20 years it will be legislation. So we should not disregard all the efforts that are being made by people, visionaries, and those who are really pushing that, because indeed the result will, and the effort will bear fruit one day. So and this of course doesn't go fast with the fast political agenda of people, especially, as I said, those who are moving from one portfolio to the other at extreme speed.
Very good. And we're out of time, André. We can all count ourselves lucky that this topic is in such good hands with someone with such good institutional memory and knowledge as you do. And I was taking a lot of notes, because I think your pivot towards a demand-driven skills policy and everything that you presented just makes a lot of sense. And for the sake of my 7-year-old daughter, I really hope that the women in tech ambitions, go somewhere over the next decade or so that she can really pursue a career without being held back. So all of this is very encouraging, André. It's been a delight to have you on board. We'll see you on this conference next time, I'm sure. And good luck with the next few weeks of intense preparations and announcements. So
thanks
you
very
a lot.
much.
And normally, of course, we would say thank you with a big applause. That's not really possible in the virtual environment, but I think you can take that as assumed, that everyone's delighted. We have run out of time, and I think, as mentioned in the beginning, this platform was built for networking, and it will be open for another at least 20 minutes or so. So when you leave the stage, do go to the networking room. Make sure your profiles are filled in, including with your interests. Go meet like-minded people and continue the discussion, not offline, but off stage, make these ideas as concrete as possible within your contexts. I'd like to give a great thanks to André, of course, to Mauro from Informatica, Jean-Marc from the French Ministry of Education. And I hope you all learned something or got ideas for something to take back to your own CIO desks, as it were. Do stick around. We'll be back, of course, on Tuesday with more very interesting information, including on AI, and then with a full-on policy panel on the final day, where we really get into the E-level stuff in more detail. So with that, thank you all for being so patient, for listening in, for asking all the questions. and I'll be around as well for a little while, and you can say hello. And I'll see you all on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.